Hey there. I know you're all working hard getting ready for those SQA, Higher Graphic Communication exams. A big exam coming up. So we're going to try to help you out today with something that's super important. File types.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like the foundation of everything you do in graphic design,
It,
really, isn't
it
it?
really is, yeah. If you don't know your file types, it's a bit like turning up to build a house with no tools.
All right.
Understanding file types is essential for this course, and to be honest, it can really give you a leg up in the exam.
Hmm.
The SQA examiners often actually mention in their reports that students struggle in this area, so let's make sure that you're ahead of the game.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like, if you need to do different things, you need the right type of file for that task.
Exactly.
It's a bit like, picking the right screwdriver for a specific screw.
It really is a great analogy.
You've got to have the right tools.
You need the right tools for the job, and just like having a well-stocked toolbox, knowing your file types will make your life so much easier. So what are you most curious about when it comes to file types?
Well, I guess just to start off with, there are so many different programs and software that we use in graphic communication.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin with all the different file types?
Well, let's start with something that you should be pretty familiar with, 2D CAD.
Okay.
So that's where you're creating flat technical drawings.
Right.
You'll be working with file types like DXF and DWG.
Okay.
Now, DWG is actually AutoCAD's native format, so it's really efficient if you're working within that program.
Hmm.
You can think of it like a really well-organized toolkit that's been specifically designed for a particular brand.
Oh,
But if you're working with somebody who's using different software, that's where DXF comes in.
right. So if I'm collaborating with someone who maybe is using a different program, then I need to use DXF.
You got a DXF is what's called an open standard.
Okay.
That means that it can be read by lots of different CAD programs,
Hmm.
kind of like having a universal adapter. Works with various tools, so it's really good for that reason. But just as a wee tip, sometimes when you're converting between DWG and DXF, you can actually lose a little bit of data.
Really?
It's not always a big deal, but it's something to watch out for.
Oh, so I need to be careful about
Be
that.
careful. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's like when you're translating something,
Yeah,
you might lose a little bit of the nuance along the way.
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes those subtle nuances can get lost.
Okay.
So how about we move into the third dimension?
Ooh.
3D CAD. This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, 3D modeling is so cool. I can only imagine there's specific file types for that as well.
You bet you're going to be encountering file types like STP, also known as STEP, and STL.
Wow, okay.
Now, STP or STEP are the ones that you're going to use for exchanging precise 3D data between different CAD software.
Okay.
It's kind of like sending a blueprint with all the measurements and the details perfectly intact.
So if I'm designing, say, like a new phone case and I want to send it to a manufacturer and they use a different program, then that's when I'd use DEP.
Absolutely. Spot on. It ensures that everybody's working from the same precise blueprint.
Right.
So to speak now, STL is really important for 3D printing.
Right, okay.
That's kind of like sending the instructions to the 3D printer, telling it how to actually build your model layer by layer.
Oh.
So imagine designing and printing your own custom phone case that's the power of STL files.
That's amazing. It's like having a wee mini factory at your fingertips.
It really is.
So we've talked about, 2D CAD, 3D CAD. What about the really, impressive visuals
Yeah.
you see in, video games and stuff? What kind of file types are used for that?
You're talking about 3D rendering. That's a whole other world of visual magic.
It is magical.
It is. And the file types that kind of reign supreme in this area are things like VRML and 3DS.
Okay.
Now, VRML is often used for interactive 3D models, which is why it's so popular in the gaming industry.
Oh, right.
Think of it like the code that brings those virtual worlds to life.
Oh, so it's not just about how things look, it's about how they interact as well.
Exactly. And 3DS is all about capturing those visual details, the
Yeah.
textures, the lighting, all those subtleties that make a 3D model look incredibly realistic.
Okay.
It's like having a high-end camera that captures every single nuance of a scene.
Right.
So there's different purposes for these different file types.
Now, one thing I know that a lot of people struggle with, even I struggled with this when I was doing the SQA higher, was the difference between raster and vector images.
Yeah, it's a common one.
Can you break that down for us?
Absolutely. It's a really important difference, but they're both super important in graphic communication.
Okay.
So raster images are made up of pixels,
Right.
tiny squares of color that come together to create an image. It's a bit like a mosaic.
Okay.
You can only see the full picture when you step back and look at all the pieces together. Things like JPG, PNG, BMP, DIF, and RAW are all pixel-based formats.
So a photograph I take on my phone would be a raster image.
You got it. And the resolution of an image The number of pixels determines the clarity.
Right. Okay.
Now, their vector images are a completely different kettle of fish.
What?
They're not based on pixels, they're based on mathematical equations and paths.
Cool.
Yeah, so this means you can scale them up or down without losing any quality whatsoever.
That's amazing.
It's like having a blueprint that you can use to build a model of any size.
Right.
The details remain sharp no matter what you do.
Wow.
Things like SVG AI and EPS are all vector formats, and they're perfect for logos, illustrations, anything that needs to be resized without getting blurry.
So if I design a logo in Adobe Illustrator,
Yeah,
that's a vector image.
absolutely.
So I could print that on like a tiny wee business card or a massive billboard, and it would still look crisp.
Exactly. That's the beauty of vector graphics.
Wow.
And that, my friend, is why understanding the difference between raster and vector is so important in graphic communication.
Right.
It's all about choosing the right tool for the job, just like we were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, this is great. I feel like I'm starting to get the bigger picture here.
That's what we like to hear.
So much to learn.
There's a lot more to cover, but we're off to a good start.
Right. I'm excited to keep learning.
Excellent. Let's move on, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay.
So we've covered 2D CAD and 3D CAD rendering and the difference between raster and vector images. What other kind of file types should we be thinking about for SQA higher graphic communication?
Well, we can't forget about the good old PDF.
Oh, yeah.
It's practically the universal language of documents, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I use PDFs all the time for schoolwork, for sending designs,
Absolutely.
for just about everything.
And that's because PDFs can handle all these different types of content, text images, even videos, and they'll look exactly the same on any computer.
That's true.
Plus, you can protect them so that nobody can accidentally or intentionally mess with your work.
That's so important, especially when you're sending things to clients and stuff like that.
Oh.
Security is really important.
Yeah.
Speaking of projects, what about videos?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing they come in quite handy for presentations and stuff like that.
You're thinking like a true graphic communicator.
Maybe even showing off my amazing SQA project work.
Exactly. Video file formats are definitely something to be familiar with.
Okay.
You'll likely encounter formats like WMV, AVI, 3GP, MOV, and MPEG.
Quite a few there.
They all have their own little quirks and best use cases.
Right.
But the important thing is knowing which format is best suited for the project you're working on.
So if I'm creating like a short animation to highlight the features of a newly designed Earn Brew bottle,
Yeah,
I need to choose the right video file format for that.
exactly. You want to make sure that it looks sharp and professional.
Of course.
And remember, the SQA examiners are looking for that professional touch.
Okay.
Choosing the right file format shows that you understand the technical side of things. And that can definitely boost your marks.
Okay. I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed by all these file types. It's like trying to remember the names of all the Monroes.
It's a lot to take in.
How am I going to keep them all straight?
Don't worry, it's not about memorizing a massive list.
Okay.
It's more about understanding what each file type is good at
Right.
and when you would use it.
Okay.
It's like learning a new language. The more you use it, the more natural it becomes.
So it's about understanding the purpose of each tool rather than just trying to remember all the names.
Exactly. And like anything, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
The more you work with different file types in your projects,
Right.
the more comfortable you'll become. Now, one thing to remember is that some file types are better suited for certain tasks than others.
Okay.
For example, if you're creating a really high-resolution image for printing,
Right.
you're going to want to use a format that preserves all of that detail, like a TIFF. But if you're just sharing an image online, a JPG will do the job just fine.
So it's about finding the balance between quality and file size.
Exactly.
You know, I wouldn't want to send my grandma a massive file and it crashes her computer.
You've got to be mindful of your audience and how the file is going to be used. Okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a handle on this whole file type business.
Good.